Well, let's bring another voice into this conversation. Well, let's get more from cross-cultural consultant Tasneem Chopra. She says we need to humanise the situation to get people to wake up to the reality of the refugee crisis. Tasneem, thank you so much for being on the drum.
Thank you.
So what of this suggestion from Malcolm Turnbull and others that suggests that Christian minorities from Syria should be given priority over Muslim refugees from Syria?
Well, I think the idea of cherry-picking or hand-picking who comes and who doesn't has an awful ring about it. And we've seen this historically in Australia with post-White Australia policy, where we decide, who comes in and who doesn't based purely on their race or their ethnicity. I think that's A, highly un-Australian, and B, really feeding into this racialisation of what is a humanitarian disaster.
There is an argument that goes that these people are least likely to be able to return to their homelands, as in persecuted Christian minorities, and that the UNHCR actually operates in this way. Isn't there something to that?
I think if we know that 11 million Syrians have been displaced and who have left and have got nowhere to go, we've got Yazidis, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have, across the board, everybody in that cohort is in a similar situation of persecution. I mean, let's not pretend that either the existing regime and, the IS are randomly killing anybody that doesn't accord with their particular worldview. That includes the Muslims as well. So I think to then decide to differentiate which life is more valuable simply based on faith or the religious practice of a community group is extremely disingenuous.
The Sydney Morning Herald columnist Paul Sheehan argued today that an intake of Muslims will import what he sees as a schism between Shia and Sunni Muslims. Have there been problems with integrating Muslim refugees in the past?
No, and I'd say the defining, rather than using the experience of Muslims in Australia and what they've brought to this country being a schism of Sunni Shia, the only negative experience that Muslims have had coming into Australia through settlement has been through Islamophobia, through the way that policy, through rhetoric, through media analysis, through the public understanding of othering Muslims as if they're not part of the Australian framework. That has been the negative experience. So using the Sunni-Shia divide is really finding a very convenient way of addressing what would be a white Australia goal.
And what do you think the implications of implementing something like the Kosovo program would be like in terms of, granting people 3 months temporary asylum?
Sure. Well, I remember working in the welfare sector. At the time, the Kosovars were being provided with these, and the overwhelming response from humanitarian agencies, from Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, Foundation for Trauma and Torture, or even the Refugee Action Collective, was consistent. When you resettle people with the intention of protection without regarding the fact that trauma is a very, very constant experience in this whole process, only to send them back, you actually do them a disservice. So I would be saying, what are they going to go back to? First of all, the state of Syria is just, it's unfathomable at the moment. So the idea of coming here for 3 months as a band-aid and then sending them back, to me was a very traumatic experience from what I understand that the Kosovars actually went through. So if you speak to welfare professionals in that sector who are at the receiving end of these refugees and say, well, what was your experience? How did it go? It was a disaster. It was a disaster in terms of mental health and well-being of people. So if we're talking about, showing Australia as a strong man and saying, hey, we're going to take 10,000 more and offer them 3 months a TPV, that's politically expedient because we're seen to be doing something, but in fact, at a humanitarian level, it's a slap in the face.
The Greens have suggested taking 20,000. Is that kind of number sustainable?
Honestly, if you're asking me that, at this particular point, seeing what I'm seeing the numbers that other countries are doing, looking at Australia's landmass and capacity, 20,000, to me, I take as many as we can feasibly take. Because, whether that's 10, 20, 30, 40, I don't know the magic number, but I certainly know that we need to do 100% more than what we're doing.